From Rolling Stone magazine, 7M is back in the news as dancers are suing 7M, claiming the older owners now run a cult. So we have covered a little bit of 7M on this channel because Katie Joy Paulson, without a crystal ball, is currently involved in a lawsuit with this exact same company. 7M sued Katie Joy Paulson, without a crystal ball, for defamation relating to similar claims that Katie Joy Paulson made. I say similar, of course, because in defamation world, you have to look to the exact stuff. But in broad strokes, similar, I think, is fair. So Katie Joy Paulson also claimed that 7M was a cult, among other things. And now the dancers are also suing 7M on the same thing. So Katie Joy Paulson's claims, at least some of them, look to be buttressed a little bit by some other people who might be in a position to know, because the dancers themselves, being involved in 7M, would have more firsthand knowledge, of course. So further good news for Katie Joy Paulson and her lawsuit as she tries to fight 7M. And now 7M is being sued for these exact same violations by people who used to work for the company. So let's read a little bit more. 3 dancers who previously worked with the church-aligned company 7M are suing their previous talent manager and pastor, who are the same person, because the pastor of the church is also, I think, the CEO of the talent management company. Now, that in and of itself, of course, isn't necessarily problematic, but, it's notable, I suppose. The dancers have joined 4 other complainants in accusing the owner and pastor of the Robert Shin Church of running a cult and taking advantage of followers. The following names Shin, 7M, and other entities and individuals. The allegation is that the church is a cult operating under the guise of a religious institution. Well, yeah, I mean, running a cult isn't in and of itself inherently illegal because, one man's cult and stuff, but what they do might be illegal. Robert, the guy who runs the talent management agency and the church, refers to himself as a man of God and preaches to the members that without submitting to him and the church, their lives will be cursed, and requires full physical and economic control over the members. Yeah, that's where things get a little bit more creepy, right? When you start being like, okay, you have to sign over your money and your life to me, things get a little bit more problematic in legal domains. An attorney for Shin did not immediately respond to the request for comments. 7M has denied asserting undue influence or taking advantage of them. The filing is part of an ongoing lawsuit initiated when Shin filed his own complaint against former church members, claiming those members extorted and defamed him. So, yeah, the church is involved in lawsuits against its members. Members are involved in lawsuits against the church. Katie Joy Paulson is here to comment on the whole thing and also involved in lawsuits relating to that. This represents the first legal action taken by dancers against the company and leadership since allegations surfaced about a year ago of these practices. The 7M dancers in the complaint were also members of the church, of course, because, that's kind of one of the ways cults work. According to the cross complaint, Shin exercised control over church members' lives and asked them to give large amounts of money to him by apparently deploying deputies called mentors and sub-mentors who exercise control over fellow memberships, which, that's not atypical for kind of a cult structure, members supervising and controlling other members, create a sense of surveillance and fear and paranoia that to exercise control. So could be the deputies did his bidding, including collecting tithes, moving monies from the bank accounts, instructing members where to live, and instructing members how to spend nearly every waking minute of their life. The cross complaint alleges that the CEO pastor interfered with members' health care, claiming he sent members to a COVID vaccine clinic where church members worked there pretending to shoot them the vaccine, but just squirting onto their arms. Meh. Shin allegedly instructed members to apply for COVID relief funds, eventually collecting $100,000 that the filing claims went to Shin's corporation rather than the church members. So apply for your COVID funds and then give them to me. Robert Shin lives a life of luxury from the ties he collects. Most of his wealth, according to the complaint, was built on the back of free labor or excessive fees from members. Okay. Yeah, that's concerning. I will simply take note here that not all this is necessarily illegal. And it's potentially true that none of it is illegal. I mean, it gets down into the weeds about things because if things are voluntary, then things are voluntary, right? And you can't make them involuntary after the fact. So regret is not the same thing as lack of consent. So things go into interesting territories on these issues because you want to know from a legal perspective, it will be helpful to know if what was going on at the time they made the decisions to give or enter into these agreements. So like one potential answer to this would be fraud, right? Fraud. They were tricked into it in some way. Undue influence. You know, their ability to make agreements was unduly influenced. You know, that they used that they tricked them, they lied to them to induce them to agree to things. They thought they were agreeing to one thing when they were really agreeing to another. Some sort of undue coercion and influence or things like that. So, you know, you want to know more about the specifics because, you know, you want to know if this was a voluntary exchange that just went wrong, in which case there's probably no legal redress, or in the other scenario, if this is truly a corruption of the agreement, which would speak to the agreement's invalidity or potentially even illegality. So there are issues there as you try to resolve that, but you know, merely high pressure tactics alone don't make things improper, if as long as they're voluntary. So the line between those two things can sometimes be a little bit hard to tease out, but those are some of the legal issues you'd be looking at. In March 2022, Rolling Stone reported on allegations that began circulating in social media. The company was a cult that isolated dancers from their families. Multiple sources told Rolling Stone at the time that 7M dancers they knew started acting strangely and refusing to socialize with them. That can mean a lot of things. Sometimes people make new connections and they want to just be with their new people and get old people out of their lives. And so, you know, is that normal? Is that culty? Is that legal? Gets into the details, right? It's a little bit hard on surface level to analyze. At this time, none of the dancers representing 7M responded to requests for comments. The three dancers who left the company have joined the lawsuit, and two of them spoke with Rolling Stone about their decision to bring the action. Even though we're only there for 2 years, it's still 2 years of my life we spent battling to give full attention to Shin and his church, dancer Kylie Douglas said. We no longer want him to be able to do that to anyone. Brainwashing, manipulating, running people down, giving time, effort, money, all that they got is false hope. So these are all allegations in a legal filing. And so, you know, trying to unpack all that in a legal sense is going to be one hell of an interesting ride, I am sure, for everyone involved. That's a complicated nightmare. Thus, that brings us to the end of the story of dancers suing 7M for cult-like allegations, which raises all kinds of concerns legally. Because, of course, courts don't do religion, right? People can have any religious belief they want, and people can kind of do any sort of religious belief they want. And courts don't get into internal operations of churches. But then, of course, you get into issues about how those influence the real world. So there's a lot of problems here as we're teasing this out. And also, there's issues with what exactly is going on here with the dancers. Are they saying they were tricked into it, that they were defrauded, they were lied to, fraud in the inducement, fraud in fact. That would be one sort of allegation. Are they claiming undue influence? That they were susceptible? Maybe that they were under some sort of intoxicant or something like that that might have been a problem. Or what exactly is the nature of the allegations? And then trying to tease out all that, it's going to be one hell of an interesting lawsuit. On the plus side, it's good news for Katie Joy Paulson and her complaint with respect to 7M, because 7M's been suing without a crystal ball. And on the initial complaint from 7M, it looked pretty good for 7M. There was a lot of very specific stuff, but now that you have these stories coming out and dancers also suing, saying cult and brainwashing and all the rest of it, well, Kay Joy Paulson's lawsuit looks a lot more promising for her. So good news for her. Her case is being buttressed that she was not showing actual malice or even potentially negligence, and also potentially that there was underlying truth to some of her statements. So, hey, her lawsuit is looking better. So good news for her. And at least for the moment, that brings us to the end of discussion of this case.